Hey guys, welcome. Hat Tuesday number 19. Hat Tuesday number 19. See that? We're almost at the 20 mark. Man, wow. Again, I'm probably a broken record here all of a sudden. So, we got my man Ian. Ian, how's it going, my friend? Good to see you. Like I said, hope all is well. I know it's been a little bit, but I've seen you coming in here. I understand. Like I said, definitely take care of what you got to take care of, and then come back to us. Though hopefully all is well. Definitely miss you. Was really fun hanging out with you in London. So good to see one of my moderators, Ian. Man, yeah. What can I say about like activities? That's right. That's right. My other moderator, Morgan. How's it going, my friend Morgan? Good to see you guys. My two faithful moderators here together at last. It's like when we first started, right? Even though that wasn't that long ago. I mentioned this before. About essentially like it's just remarkable that I've started streaming in August and already we've gotten to this point. How you doing, Morgan? Hope all is well. Hopefully school is either going okay, kicking back up, and I hope it goes well. It always reminds me of back when I was in school. Hey, my man Nathan, what's up, Nathan? Hope all is well as well. You're probably on the road again. It seems like that's kind of like your day to day. And hopefully you enjoy it. Like I said, I know that travel is one of those things that I love, but anything in that when you do too much is almost always like it can wear on you. I understand because I'm not a very good preparer. I like to travel, but I'm a poor planner. So traveling and doing all the lead up and all the planning that goes into travel, it takes a toll on me. So hopefully, it treats you a little bit better. It's the Tuckster. There you go. Hopefully Nathan doesn't mind that. I kind of like it, to be honest. I think it's pretty cool. See, we got all the greetings. We got all the greetings here. See, that's what I love. Again, it's the whole point of this is the online version of Cheers. You guys hear me say that ad nauseum, and it really is the truth. I try to set this up as kind of like an online social club or an online bar, right? It's like sometimes I have a drink, sipping a little bit of my Don Q here, and I got my man Paul. Paul, how's it going, friend?
Pretty good, thank you. You?
Doing well. And Paul is a very, very humble gentleman, but sometimes we have to go and we have to brag for him. So Paul just reached 500 subscribers on his YouTube channel. So I'm going to go and say congratulations to Paul. Well deserved. And like I said, I think it's the first of many more milestones to come.
Well, let's hope so. I mean, it's all down to those people that want to support me and find my videos useful. I'm just having fun doing it. So it's a lovely byproduct that people actually want what I do. So I mean, it's fabulous. And I don't know what's happened, but whether you get to a certain number and then it kicks off, and I don't know. But this month, the amount of inquiries that I've had has surpassed anything that I've had before. And I think it's a combination, I guess, of the build-up of what you do, and maybe it's the time of year as well. I don't know, but very, very pleased, and thank you for acknowledging that, Luke.
Yeah, no problem, Paul. Like I said, I know the kind of gentleman that you are. You're somebody that's very, you're always self-effacing, and and I love that about you. But at the same time, your network here, we owe it to you guys, into the community to kind of brag for you. And I think that's always the best kind anyway. To be honest, let's see here. It says here, we got Morgan said, yes, please let me know if you'd rather me not do that again, Lathan. Yeah, that's no problem. Morgan called Nathan the Tuckster. I happen to think it was cute, but I just want to make sure nobody's, everybody's okay with nicknames. I think it's a really cool name. But we'll let Nathan chime in on that. Morgan, we got my two faithful moderators here back for the first time in a little bit, to be honest. It's at least it feels like it's been a while. So we got the congratulations, Paul. Congrats, Paul. The yippee. You see, this is what it's all about. Because ultimately, we have to do this because, again, and like I mentioned, Paul is somebody that really downplays a lot of his accomplishments, and it's a great character trait. I happen to love that about Paul, but also at the same time, like, we could brag for him, and it's okay sometimes to kind of, I made a post the other day about, I didn't reach the 100 subscribers yet. I think I'm like 94 now, but it's important for us to give ourselves permission to celebrate ourselves sometimes, because sometimes we don't have a network to celebrate our accomplishments, and sometimes we do that by buying a fine hat, right? We talked about that milestone hat. You made partner, you're gonna go get married. Hopefully in this network you found a nice selection of hatters to go and support. Paul being one of them. Obviously Robert, Brian, and Josh. And then hopefully we can sneak Brad into the back into the fold for making hats. And then Morgan says the Tuckster, there's only one. Hey, I love that. I love that. It's kind of like the Highlander, right? There can only be one. But Paul, thank you. Congratulations. Like I said, I know this is gonna be like a blip on your way to wow. I feel like I just love. I was watching your video the other day about the when I say the other day, I probably was yesterday, on the 3D printer.
Yeah.
Really love that. Really love that, because I feel like
down to this channel, because it was Josh that Josh held his hand out and said, "Look, I'll make you one. I'll print one for you." And then we got talking, and I'm of a certain age where this technology is I thought a little bit beyond me, But actually, talking to Josh, it became clear that maybe it was time to succumb and do something. And I asked Josh's advice because he was saying he was saving up for another machine, and I wanted to get one that will be sort of future proofed as much as you can. When and bearing in mind, I've only got limited use for it for making the hat blocks and things. And I was over the moon with the support that he gave me. I went out and bought it, and that was the subsequent sort of video from it. And it's amazing how there is a place for new technology and these things. But I'm very much of the preference that I set up my business to preserve the old ways of doing things, to buy as many of the old tools and blocks and things as I could. But in the UK, it's becoming more difficult to actually find these tools. And actually, bit of news that I'm not sure, I haven't really checked it out 100%, but I heard from somebody this week that maybe Christie's, the hat company, is struggling at the moment and may be going out of business, or there's something going on there that I'm not quite sure. I've got to do a bit more research, but it's very, very sad if that's the case, because it could be another hat brand that I don't know that it'll disappear, because I'm sure somebody will buy the brand. But it's such a shame to hear that that these businesses of having tough times, if indeed that's correct.
And again, I don't want to speculate, but at the same time, what I've learned, right? Because obviously we've been very big on Lock & Co lately. Obviously our trip to Lock & Co was a big part of that. What I understood and what I learned was that there is a connection between Christie's and Lock & Co in terms of the supplier side. Again, I don't want to chime in too much, because some of that I got from ChatGPT. We all know that ChatGPT, it's useful, but it's not always 100% verified information. So I'd hate to put bad information out there, and I always qualify myself. But the way I understood it was that Christie's and Lock & Co do have a relationship. Christie's does make some of their hats, according to what ChatGPT says, because somebody asked a question, and I said, well, I don't really know the answer to that. So I went over to ChatGPT, and that's what they said. They also have other suppliers. I think they have artisan suppliers as well. Paul, I don't know if you care to even weigh in on that, because I do know that you're very familiar with Lock & Co, at least way more familiar than I am.
No, I think it would make sense that the pictures that I've seen of the Christie's setup has been very much the metal molds that we talked about. Remember, we talked about the wooden blocks, which were open crown and round, whereas the metal molds, the designers of hats would actually design the hat and then get a metal mold cast for them in aluminium, and then there'll be a bottom and a top, and the felt goes in. There's steam involved, and there's a gas burner involved, and they put the felt in, they press it, the steam comes up, and they also then dry it out. Now, I suspect that Christie's would do that for Lock and Co, or could have done that for Lock and Co. But I have no certainty to do that. But I certainly know that that's done by many people. In fact, it's been spoken to me about that when my volume gets up, that I might want to consider, maybe getting 10, 20, 50 hats pressed out of various sizes and go that route. And I'm nowhere near that yet. And you know what? I actually enjoy making them by hand and forming them by hand. So I've got a little niche, and I'm quite happy to remain in the niche.
Paul, I'm so proud of, like, again, the story. I mean, I think, and I know we've had talks about this, but at some point, I'll say this as a subscriber to your channel, of you sitting down and then talking about that journey, kind of like this is how I got here. And you probably, and maybe you've already done that, but obviously your story is still ongoing. But I feel like it's such a great motivator for those folks that are like dipping their toes into this area, right? Into becoming a hat maker. Obviously, we know Josh is relatively new, but I feel like you've done something that's noteworthy in that you kind of, like I said, you shortcutted your process. And I hate to use the term shortcut because it kind of implies that you cut corners, but you didn't. You kind of, what I'm saying is that you fast-tracked your process in becoming a hat maker, and it wasn't an accident. So I feel like that story is very motivational. And we got my man Nathan here. Nathan, how's it going, my friend?
Hey, how are you?
All the better for seeing for you, as they say.
Nathan, on the road again?
Yeah, I'm in my office.
Understood.
No, actually, today is an office day, but I've got a leadership meeting a little bit later, and I wanted to get out and run some errands around town before I had to do that. So I am on the road right now. Yes.
Well, Nathan, I'll tell you, I mean, first of all, thank you for contributing. You were the first one to jump in terms of contributing ideas. This show really was one of the 3 ideas that you had submitted initially and got the ball rolling. And, obviously we have others that will chime in over time. But I felt like this is a discussion that we've had kind of like informally, maybe in piecemeal. But I thought it was such a great topic only because that's really what it's all about, right? The idea is that we don't it's not like we're trying to be, I hate, hopefully I'm not offending Robert. Robert calls himself, he's evangelical about this. And I know that's like a gift and a curse, right? Because I grew up in the church, right? I grew up in a Pentecostal church. I know about the idea of the evangelicals. And I do also know that from a lot of standpoints, it can be a little divisive in terms of like that enthusiasm to want to make converts, right? And create new folks. Some folks don't like that idea. They're like, well, wait a minute. Because everybody kind of believes in free will. But there always is free will, right? To pick and choose. Nobody's making somebody wear a hat. But what we're trying to do is for those folks that are on the fringe, right? Those folks that I always think about them as like the, and to put them in voting terms, like the swing states, right? Here in the United States, we talk about swing states. We have red states, we got blue states, and then we have what we call sometimes these swing states. Maybe they're purple, right? And those are the states that could go either way, right? Meaning that there's some folks that they're like, I don't know, I'll use the term hat curious. Hopefully, that's, I've used that term before. But if you're hat curious, how do we get those folks and empower them and enable them and encourage them? Like, hey, if you're even remotely curious about this, we're going to remove as many barriers as possible for you to go and do this. And you can decide, right? Like, I'm a big believer in try it and see how it lives, right? Nobody says you have to, right? You can wear a hat one day and you can see how it lives. And maybe the next day you say, nope, not for me. And that's cool. That's fine.
Yeah, I think, it's a gateway topic, I think, because you can go down so many different roads and paths. And, Paul and I are going to be collaborating on a project, and nothing to release right now, but, we're going to be working on something. And I kind of was thinking, okay, well, how do we have this item, this hat, that yes, it's for a huge benefit, but what kind of hat can we make that people would actually wear, not just kind of put on display? And I thought, okay, well, why do people wear hats? And how do you get somebody that doesn't really wear hats to at least venture down there? And I, you sent the graphic out behind the
Yeah.
scenes, but I don't think it has anything to do with the in at least in the beginning, the makeup or the quality of the hat. Because if you
Correct.
try to get someone to wear a hat that doesn't wear a hat, and all you do is talk about that hat, you're not going to really do anything. It's more about the experience and
Correct.
what you feel when you wear a hat. What's
Correct.
the benefits of it? There's a certain a certain way you go about that. And I think it's such a gateway topic.
Yeah.
I think in the UK, what I found is that when I was starting, I came out of the doctor's and he told me that you've got to wear a hat. I was a little bit devastated at that time. So I came home and I thought, well, where am I going to buy a hat? Because I've got baseball caps and things, but I need something a bit more appropriate for my age and for the clothing that I wear. And I started thinking, and I live about 70 miles outside of London, and there are some good fashion shops, there's some good shopping centers, but none of them sold anything other than caps and baseball caps and regular Baker Boy caps, and there was nothing there that was a trilby or a fedora or something of a even Western and festival type hats. They just were not there. And so, that took me down the route, as I've said before, of buying secondhand and buying online. But actually what that threw up was all the size situation. So there's a couple of levels of stopping me from buying a hat. The availability, the fact that I needed to try it on because of the sizing. I didn't know what size crown, what size brim would actually suit me. I know that my my grandfathers had worn trilbies, so relatively short brims, but I'm a bigger person frame-wise than they are, and so I eventually took myself off to London, and there, of course, I met lots of different hat shops that I'd sort of dreamed of going to those hat shops just because I liked hats when I was a child. I thought, it'd be nice to own a nice hat at some stage or another. But having gone to those hat shops, it then opens up a whole can of worms, because it's what size brim, crown, color, trim, price point, what type of material, and then you get confused. So this is where partly I thought, well, why don't I try and help to make a little bit of a difference, just a teeny weeny difference, by sharing some of that experience and actually explaining a lot of it and showing people that, I at one stage I had a budget of £10 to spend on a hat, right? And I bought myself a hat, refurbished it. Do you know what? It was a rabbit fur felt hat. And it was absolutely fine. So you don't have to have money to start off with it. You just have to have a little bit of imagination and be prepared to perhaps wear something that's secondhand, has been used and maybe not abused, but been used. But then, of course, you go on and start to understand what suits you. And that's the thing, is try as many hats on as you can. Get as much advice as you can. Look at other people who may be a similar frame to you, or maybe in a similar job to you. You're not going to turn up on a building site with your backpack and your sandwiches in with a beautiful fedora. But you might well turn up at the office with your overcoat, your briefcase, and a very nice fedora. So it's what's appropriate for your lifestyle. And break yourself in easy, because if you were to get something like a festival hat with a very large brim, or a Western hat in the UK, or a large fedora in the UK, you might feel a little bit uneasy about some of the comments that people make. As when we were in London, we had some pretty nice comments, and people were acknowledging that we were slightly unusual, and so you have to be prepared, comfortable, and be able to deal with that. Not many people can when they haven't done that before. You're sticking out, you're taking your head above the precipice, as we say.
No, absolutely, Paul, man, I love the way you break everything down. I think, and because this is that conversation I definitely had with Paul. Again, I think Paul was, because Paul's been so generous with his time on this channel. I've had a chance to have some of these discussions. We haven't had them as in depth and had a show dedicated, but I definitely, I think we're on the same page in that. The way we do this is kind of, and somebody mentioned it might have been you, Nathan. Somebody in our group discussion mentioned this. We sell this hat hobby by being good people, by going and normalizing this, becoming, right, like, because everybody has that idea. Like, they see somebody on the street, a stranger with a hat on, they start thinking something. They won't tell you because they've learned either whatever through the movies or whatnot, that, well, this is a certain kind of guy, right? Maybe somebody you don't want to say something to, or somebody, they're not approachable. But kids will tell you the truth. And you want to kind of debunk some of these myths, right? Because I'll tell you, I was, and some of you guys that follow me on Facebook, you see that I go out with a group of guys, and they're not just guys. This is just a group that's a local group. They go out to various bars and they hang out. They're called Drink Nova. Shout out to Drink Nova, by the way. Shout out to John and Deb who run Drink Nova. But some of the folks that I meet there, they're looking at this, and there's one other gentleman that wears a hat, William. I've talked about him before. Now, William's hat style, you could tell he's a different type of hat wearer. But for me, seeing one, first of all, for myself, I'm going to just speak for myself as a relatively new hat person, because some of you guys have been wearing hats for a long time, right? Robert said that he's been wearing hats since he was in his teens. Myself and Paul, I think we're relatively new to this game, and we got in here very differently. But when you see somebody else out in the wild, so to speak, that's another hat person, you don't focus on what's different. Sometimes you do that, right? You do the compare and contrast, because we're natural compare. We folks that do compare and contrast for obvious reasons. But I noticed that he's a different type of hat wearer. But I was so tickled that I met another hat wearer in this group. And besides William, like, there's other folks that are like, you know what? You look like Run DMC. You know what? Do you have a head of hair? That's the comment that hit me, that really said, do you have a full head of hair? Like, you're bald, right? I'm like, no. So I'll take off my hat and I'll show them, this. And I'm like, no, I my dad, it must be from my dad's genes. My mom is actually the one with thinner hair. My dad has this mane of hair, and I don't even know if that really changes, and that does, because there is that stereotype. Oh yeah, only bald guys wear hats, and I'm like, well, no, I choose to wear this hat for very different reasons. But if I did go bald, well, that'd be great, because now I'm prepared. But it's one of those things in terms of going out there, being very friendly, being very approachable, because some folks, it takes a little bit of gumption, a little bit of a little bit of a bravery to go and say and ask you questions. And I try to reward that by being very approachable and answering questions as honestly as I can, and with a smile, right? Because the idea is that you're free to ask me, like, this is not like, it's not done, right? Meaning you don't get to ask me one question and that's it, it's over. You can ask me maybe next week or the next event, hey, how do I get, what's a good first hat? Do you know people? Where do you get your hats from? I want those questions because I want to normalize that. And maybe somebody else is listening in, and they're like, and they'll ask me. So I love these interactions, and I think that's really how you win over folks. And you got to do it in a very, very, like, you would do it. I mean, it's really weird because it's not like I'm trying to go out there and actively convert people. It's just I happen to think I'm a nice person. That's the reason why Good Lukes is the name of this channel. I think I'm a good person. I try to be as good of a person as I can. I feel like when I wear a hat, I want to be an even better person. In which case, if I can go and give people and enable them to want to go and wear a hat, I'm all for it. I don't know.
Yeah, I think what you're talking about is being an ambassador, and what Paul mentioned, getting the right hat is a big deal, because when you wear a hat, you want to feel good, right? So
right.
you know, but the obstacle, I think, is that, you know, if there was a hat shop, if there were 3 hat shops in every city, you know what, you'd see a lot of hats, because people
Correct.
can go in there, they can try them on, they can see what they like, what they don't like.
Yeah.
Well, we are, you, the 3 of us, and all the hat wearers out there, we're that storefront now. So
Yeah.
we're the ambassador. So when they see us, then they see different. Then now they're seeing different types of hats, different sizes, shapes, and it's up to us to really facilitate. You know, when those conversations, or when we get asked or complimented, you know, the ambassador switch turns on, and because it is, we are all very enthusiastic about it, and you know, to see more hats out there, you know, we get excited about that stuff.
I mean, I'll just share a little story with you. I've got so many stories this week; it's unreal. But anyway,
I love it.
The black hat behind me here is a hat that I've just made, and I'll tell you why I've made it. I had a gentleman. So it's a very flat hat. I don't know if you can see it, but it
looks like a gambler ball.
It's a gambler, yeah, and it all trimmed really nicely around, so that the whole of this is covered. And it's a gambler, but then it's got a slight point in here. So I had a gentleman come to me who said that he wanted a hat, and I said, okay. But actually, it was his one and only hat. Never worn a hat. Always wants to. He always wanted a hat. He wanted the best possible hat. And we got talking and so on. And long and the short is, he's not a moneyed man, as we say. He's a gentleman who's clearly saved up his money for a hat. And what I've done is I've made this in rabbit felt, because I've ordered. I mean, the fur felt alone from FEPSA is over £300 just for the felt. It's 100% beef for felt, Western, and rather than him not like the brim width, the height, because he's never tried a hat on. Well, he's tried baseball caps and things, but not a full hat. I've made this up on the basis that I can always sell it, and it's got a nice liner in it and everything else. It will sell, but I'd much rather go and see the gentleman at his house, because he's rather a slight gentleman. He's not very This is a size 56, so it's quite a small for a UK gentleman. And just take him through the whole process and get it right, because what means something to me is if I get it right. Even though he said his wife has only allowed him to have one hat.
Right.
That's my challenge, right?
That's
my challenge. I'm rising to it, right? And I've got to sell it to his wife. So that's why I'm going to the house. So then I will get to know his wife, I hope, and share with her the reason why every man's wardrobe should have maybe 8 hats in it. And I'll go through what they are. And by the time I've finished, as long as she makes me a cup of tea, I know I'm in, and you can see. But But that I thought was a nice story. I mean, look, he's going to be spending probably £600-700 on a hat, which I know elsewhere would be maybe £1,200 to £1,500. But that's an awful lot of money to spend on the one and only hat that you have. Yeah. So I would much rather invest the time and get it right with them. Another client this week, we've gone through the one hat build for him, and I'm just waiting for some things to turn up. Actually, it's the leather sweatbands from America. But I've been sending back to him, pictures of the block being built on the 3D printer and talking to him about the felts and so on. He's not even had the first hat yet. He's talking about the third hat. He's like you, Nathan. He's like he just can't get in front of himself. He just wants, I want it all. And part of that is I come back to the shop front that Nathan talked about earlier on in the conversation there, and that is I made the decision to invest money into felts and have well, I've got about 60 I think hats up on my website now, and it's not that I know that I'm going to sell all of them. I'll sell some of them, and yes, I do sell maybe 5 or 10 a month off of the website or off of eBay. But what happens is that it provokes people's thoughts on what they might look good with, and they come back to me, and we then start making custom hats for them. So that's just another way, because you're quite right. We have to build this window that people can look into to see what hats might suit them. And I think the other thing is that many of our hat shops in London, and this might not be the same as in America, are very traditional. You've seen them, Luke. Now we've took you around, and in fact, they're very traditional in their design approach and the colors that they use. I know that Lock & Co, they showed us some of the brighter colors they're working on and so on, but it's quite challenging to get some of the designs that I do into production, because there's not that many people that want to buy those type of hats, and therefore there's 2 or 3 levels of where you go to purchase a hat. So on the one hand, if you want a traditional hat, you can go to London, you can get measured up, and you can walk away and pay the price and go home with a hat. If you want something special, then you need to work with an artisan sort of hat maker who will design and build it, whether that's in your country or whether it's elsewhere. But they would do something to your design, and that's where, as hatters, absolutely love it. Brilliant fun. And, Nathan and I, we've had some chats and some fun, and I really enjoy working with you, Nathan. And that's hopefully how things in the hat world will evolve, that you've got these different levels, so that people that are coming into the industry for the first time, they know it's like any other business. They have to invest. Okay,
correct.
You just don't get the rite of passage to sell your hats by just turning up, right? You've actually got to go through and do something and invest in it, believe in it, and be passionate about it, and that will come through when you're actually talking to your client and you're discussing a hat for them. But ultimately, you do have to make a good product and use good, solid.
Correct. I just thought that the main thing when you first started with that, Paul, like that point in the beginning, I don't know if there's a name for that point, but anybody that goes through and is a big fan of movies, such as myself, you'll remember Gene Hackman as Popeye Doyle in The French Connection, and you'll know, right? So I'll show you this. This is a pork pie hat, made famous, but for one by Gene Hackman and Popeye Doyle. Now it doesn't have the point. Popeye Doyle's hat, his pork pie in The French Connection, had a point in the beginning and right in the front, and I thought it was very interesting. I don't really know much about the history of having a point in the front of one's hat. It's not something that I see a lot with pork pies, but I thought when you said that, Paul, I thought it was really interesting that this gentleman wanted that point on his gambler. And again, and I don't know, maybe that's the way all gamblers are. I just don't know that much. I actually don't own a gambler as far as I'm aware. But yeah, these are things that you never know, like what's going on, because it could be that, I don't know, didn't Clint Eastwood wear a gambler at some point? It feels like he did.
Yeah. I mean, I think it was in one of his westerns, of course, with the spaghetti westerns.
The Good, the Bad, the Ugly. I don't know which one it is.
But the gambler didn't normally have that point in it, and the gentleman I'm working with doesn't want the indentations. He just wants the point. And of course, the actual height of the crown is about 9 centimeters rather than 10, because he's got a slight build. So it's all these things that we take into consideration, and that's where when I talk to clients and go through my whole checklist that you and I have spoken about, I've got about 20 different points that I ask questions of, and it's so important that I get the customer's feedback, because they've never actually thought about this detail in a hat, because to them, they go into a shop, they see a hat, they try it on, if it fits, if it suits them, if it's within their budget, then they'll buy it. It's that simple. And of course, we're offering that little bit of extra edge. And one thing I did want to mention today is a big up to Fern Thatcher. Fern Thatcher, I don't know whether you know the company. It's a leather working company in Missouri. And I found them on the internet, and they make my leather sweatbands, 2-inch sweatbands, really, really soft leather. And I've just ordered, I think it's 40 or 50 of them. I gave them the order last week. Their machine went down. They fixed it within a few days. I contacted them yesterday and said, look, I've got 8 orders. People are waiting for me to make the hats. Any chances? Let me know. They made them today, and I paid for them. They've sent them, and they'll arrive between 2 and 5 days. Now that is fantastic service, but it's also what I'm trying to say here is that the marketplace has shrunk. The ability for us in the UK to be able to get hats to you, and the US to be able to give either hats or the individual parts for a hat over here in that time is fabulous. And how good is that to be able to make something that's quite special?
Correct. Shout out to them because, and I'll get the actual name. That way we can shout them out, and I can show you guys the name. But Paul, I know that you mentioned your desire right from the early episodes to try to up your sweatband game, and you talked about how the leather that was over in the UK wasn't up to snuff in terms of comparing it to the leather that you get from the US. So it was nice that you found a company, a supplier that was able to give you what you were wanting, because that's the other part about Paul. And I think Nathan can definitely attest to this. Paul is everybody would want a hatter like Paul, right? Because, and again, I say this, and I know he's going to be bashful because he's a humble guy, but who doesn't want somebody that goes after the very best, right? So meaning Paul wants to get the very best felts. He wants to get the very best leather, the very best materials. So when you buy that hat, especially at the price points that Paul has, let's be honest. I mean, Paul is very reasonable with his prices considering the level of quality that you're getting. And it's one of those things. I know, again, I have to brag about Paul because Paul's not going to do it by himself. He's too humble. But folks like myself, customers like myself, like Nathan, we've seen the product, and Paul is still evolving. And that's why I love hearing these stories. It's completely within character because that's what you've been doing. Even in the short time that you've been part of this channel, Paul, you've been constantly trying to level up the quality of your hats. And you got to admire that. Like, you got to be like, somebody's viewing this and they're like, wow, that's the guy I want to call my hatter. He's the guy, right? That Paul's the gentleman that you want to pass their card, or right, even if you don't have a card, but you want to take that card and you want to brag about. You should go see my hatter because
well, it's nice to do the same. Yeah. I mean, I'm just very interesting. Before Christmas, I found a supplier of leather in Scandinavia, and they deal in reindeer skin leather, and I'd never considered that before, but I'm on this quest I want to be able to make a hat that is of Western weight, and you don't even feel that you've got it on. And I think part of that is, to wear it all day, because it's a working hat, let's face it, and that you don't even feel that you've got it on. And I think part of that is down to the sweatbands, and hats off, as they say, to Hornscoff and Hufford, because they've both got very, very beautiful leather sweatbands, and I haven't got to that yet. So I'm on this journey, as you say, and I'm happy to invest. I'm happy to trial things, but it's going to take me years. I look at Robert, and he's been going for I think he said 7 or 8 years. It may be longer than that. I think, wow, fantastic. Wouldn't I? It would be lovely if I could meet with Robert and spend a couple of days, just both of us, making a hat for each other. That would be marvelous. But he's in Vancouver, I'm in the UK. I mean, wow, you can't get much further apart.
Let me tell you about this, Robert. I don't know if you're watching, Robert, but hopefully at some point you get to see this. I've gotten some tremendous feedback about your presence on this channel. And I know Robert is very self-aware. He knows that he has strong opinions, and I always welcome Robert's opinions because, again, even though it might seem sometimes that we're going back and forth, and hopefully Robert knows that I'm not trying to disagree with him just to be disagreeable, but Robert has this ability to defend his opinions, and he's very, like I said, I put a lot of weight in Robert's opinions, even if I don't agree with them, because of the experience that he has. I have a high level of respect for Robert. And I got to tell you, Robert, if you want to know, I've gotten some really great feedback about you. And I know, Paul, I've gotten that about Paul and various folks on the channel. But Robert, this week, I got to tell you, you've been getting a lot of folks saying, hey, I like that guy. And that's why I really want Robert part of these discussions, because Robert's somebody that's not afraid to be disagreeable, right? He's not afraid to go and say and say, you know what, this is my feeling. And you know what? He's always very respectful. He's never come on here and been nothing but a gentleman. And I think that's what comes across to the audience. So as what do you call it? Genuineness, right? People love genuine attitudes and genuine characters. And I know I tend to be more of the nice guy. Paul does. Nathan, you've been a complete gentleman. But I love having Robert because he's a ballsy guy. And I got to tell you, like I said, I think people recognize that, and they like that as well. So it's like there's room for all these personalities in this hat hobby, and that's one of the many reasons why I love it so.
Yeah, I appreciate one of his comments recently about new hat wearers that they tend to start with that more narrow brim, and I never really like considered that aspect of it, but that was his experience, and I thought back, I'm like, well, yeah, actually, my first fedora was a stingy brim. It was a small, almost like a trilby, and that was, that opened up. Well, let me get one with a little bit big. Then I got a straw hat that had like a 2-inch brim.
Right.
And then, all of a sudden I got another felt hat that had a 2-inch brim. And all of a sudden it started getting bigger and bigger. And then I got some cowboy hats. And I never really thought about how the new hat wearer like experiments with the smaller hat and then expands that. And I think it's similar to just wearing a hat in general to your wardrobe, because it may start with, if you have to wear a suit somewhere, or maybe you wear a casual dress or whatever, and you have that opportunity to wear a hat, a fedora or a trilby or a stingy brim, whatever, and that almost like opens the door up, because then you feel more comfortable wearing that hat with different outfits and different avenues.
Correct. And it goes both ways. This is exactly, and I think, Nathan, that was one of your points, is that there are folks that they only started off, they only got into this hat hobby because they wanted an Indiana Jones hat, right? We did a show recently on the Raiders of the Lost Ark. Some people, they stop right there, right? Meaning I got my Indy hat, or I got several Indy hats, right? One for each iteration, right? And that's it. They don't want to know anything about any kind of other hat. But some folks, they start off with the Indy hat, and they said, oh, wait a minute. I didn't know I wanted a Panama. I didn't know I wanted a stingy brim. I didn't know I wanted this style, right? Humphrey Bogart would be another one of those gentlemen. Frank Sinatra will be another one of those gentlemen, right? And I made a nod to Frank Sinatra in one of my posts, because, and I know Robert and I both agree. We have very, very high affinity for Frank Sinatra. And besides his music, just the icon that he was for style. And there are so many folks that you don't know. Like I said, we always talk about those levers, right? Those levers or levers, depending on how you choose to pronounce the word. But we all have these different levers that get pulled at some point, either through who we're seeing on the big screen or the small screen, or maybe in the music that we listen to. But regardless of how you get into this, once you get into this hat hobby, you have the option, right? There's so many, like a whole world of possibilities start opening to yourself, because you go out there to find your tribe, right? You go out there, you're like, okay, who else is wearing a hat? Like, nobody in my neighborhood is wearing a hat. I'm going to go to the internet. And then you find yourself to Facebook or the Fedora Lounge or Instagram. And then you start finding your tribe, right? And then you start seeing all these hats that you like, wow, I like that hat. I want one of those. I got a little extra bread to spend, and then I'm going to either buy a vintage one, or I'll seek somebody like Paul or like Robert or like Josh or like Brian, and I'm going to go get that hat. And this is how this thing materializes all of a sudden. Like, and again, and I feel like I'm talking ad nauseum about collectorness, because we are collectors in many respects, but obviously I have this affinity for this hat community. So I view us as not just, we're a little bit more than just collectors, but this is the way the process goes. And it's just nice to see that unfold. And that's why when I go and I hear Robert's point of view, because Robert, his standpoint is, and hopefully he's not here to kind of to express this, but he described it the way you mentioned, Nathan, which is people start off with the stingy brim, but when they really get their gumption, right, they really get the cojones to go out there and wear a bigger brim, they will go out there and do so because they feel like the stingy brim was that step up. And I agree with that. It's just that I think that the process can happen in so many other different ways. Because again, you saw Brad here talking about the Indy. Like Brad didn't intend to go wear anything but the Indy hat. That's what brought him into the fold. And you see what the process that he underwent. And I love it. I just love the whole process, the whole thing.
And I think Paul mentioned before about, in the UK especially, but I think it's probably around the world. If you just had that sports personality or celebrity or
Yeah.
somebody major, if they start, because here the LBJ,
Yeah.
when he was president, he wore the open road, and all of a sudden it became popular, right? So
Right.
if you have that big name that they're a hat wearer, all of a sudden you start getting, he looks good, he looks confident, and then
Yeah.
people start playing around in their mind like, oh, maybe like I want to feel like that, I want to look like that, I
Yeah.
like what he's wearing. That sometimes that's a gateway.
Yeah. Yeah. If James Bond wore a hat, then you would see this whole other faction of like the folks that found their way through Frank Sinatra or through Indiana Jones or through Run DMC. You will see that whole faction of, I wear a hat because of James Bond. Because James Bond is one of those iconic characters that you see, like that's the guy that gets the girl. He's savvy about cars, about dressing, about everything, right? He's like one of these guys, like the most interesting man in the world for a lot of folks. And if he wore a hat, well, I would almost 99% guarantee that a lot of folks in our hat community would have found their way into hatting because of James Bond. And that's the power of the influencer.
Well, Sean Connery wore a trilby, and in fact, Lock & Co. Produced a range called Lock and Roll. So it's like a rock and roll type sub-brand that they had. And more recently, they've built the 007 range of hats. And so there's the women's hats, the men's hats. So it follows along the lines of what you just said. And I think the other interesting thing in the UK, and it'd be very interesting to see how it pans out, is the wearing of Western hats, cowboy hats. Because they're a 4-inch brim at most of them. Before you even consider wearing a hat, people jump in and just go, nah, it's the scene, it's the country and Western scene, it's the uniform. I'll wear it. Now that's an interesting one because somebody that's a bit more conservative like myself would probably would wear a 4-inch, but normally I'd wear something like this, which is like almost a fedora. It's the open road, it's the fedora, slightly narrower brim and so on. But what we're seeing is that there's more and more music events being put on. More and more people are asking for these Western hats. In fact, I've spoken this week to probably the biggest Western wear shop in the UK, maybe even in Europe, and they happen to be local to me, and I didn't even realize they were there. But they now want to talk to me about producing hats for them and their clients and so on. Thanks, Nathan. And it's like wow, they've seen what I've done, and it's like, wow, we wish we found you earlier, and it's like, well, I wasn't making hats earlier, but
people may not think that I don't own any Western hats. I do. I haven't photographed them, but I do own a couple. I'll show you one right here. It's like, you don't think Luke has a Western like style?
Oh boy.
And again, it's probably a little gaudy, right, with the hat, with the particular band. But I see these things, and I'm like, I'm taking this home. Like, meaning this may not be on my head at some point, but I will take this home, and I'll figure it out later. Right? Meaning maybe somebody would like it more than I do. There you go. See? This is
oh man. Oh, look at this.
There you go. See? Again,
this is like a 10-gallon hat in the UK.
Let me see what I got here. Man, you guys are making me break it out.
Yeah, you got one too.
Yeah. You see, I mean, again, it goes to show you, like I said, when you're really into this hobby, you're able, and I mentioned this before, you're able to say, you know what, that might not be something I wear, but I can dig it.
Yeah, exactly. Look, I'm not going to walk into my pub in the local village with this hat on.
Yeah.
Oh, that's
there
nice.
You go.
Yeah.
That's a serious. What's the? That's like at least 3 inches, right?
Ooh, this is a Stetson. This is a part of their Buffalo collection. I think it's about a 3.5 inch. It's buffalo wool, and I keep this in my vehicle because it makes a good, like if it's raining. My PJ Strat. I would rather not get in a drench of rain with this. So I keep this with me to kind of do that. So
and that's the thing about it. It's like. And this is the flip side of that argument of like the stingy brim, right? So there's folks that anything less than 3 inches, right? They're on the other side of the spectrum. When we talk about the bell curve, right? If we're talking about the bell curve in terms of the number of inches that you wear that you prefer on your brim, there's folks, right, that obviously like myself, that we're on this side where stingy brim is our preference, right? That's the majority of our hats. But there are other folks on the whole other side, anything less than 3 inches, right? They might even go out to the 4 inches plus because, well, they're wearing it for the same reason that Nathan just shared. They're trying to maximize sun protection. They're trying to go and get a certain look. Whatever the reason is, they're looking at anything less than a 3-inch brim as that's not even useful. Yeah. And it's funny. It's just.
Yeah.
I think for my fedoras, I tend to stay under the 3-inch, 2.5, 2 3/8. Or 2. Yeah. And, I see that hat that Paul showed us earlier, the black one. I mean, I'm looking at that. I'm like, wow, that actually looks pretty good. Can I pull that off with a flat brim hat? So you kind of play around with those, right? When you really get into it, and that's the fun. That's really the fun. You unlock the fun when you get into that.
Yeah.
I mean, in the UK, when I've had formal things to go to, whether it's a business thing or whether it's a funeral or something, then I'll wear a trilby. I've made myself a black and a dark blue beaver felt trilby, and that way I think that is respectful to the fact that I'm wearing a suit and the formal occasion. I wouldn't wear one of my wide brim fedoras because it's too relaxed, Now that might not be the same in America, but in the UK, I think it's more acceptable. It's bad enough going to a funeral in this country wearing a hat, let alone something that shouts out, drug dealer or whatever it is.
Correct.
I've it's interesting. Like when I started wearing Western like cowboy hats, full brim, 4.5 inch brims.
Yeah.
Actually, there were more guys that I knew. They started getting Western hats, so it had even more appeal to it, and that's a big leap, I think, if you don't wear hats, and then all of a sudden, man, you go out and buy a cowboy hat. That's a leap, because I think it takes a lot of confidence to do that. But once you do it, the confidence you get from the compliments and how you look and how you feel when you wear it, that just builds and builds and builds. So it's interesting that the Western hats that I had probably persuaded others more than when I wear 2.5 or 2 3/8. So it was an interesting dynamic.
Correct.
Yeah.
Especially if it's like right out of your zone, right? So we talked about, right? So I was thinking about like what hats I'm gonna wear to London, right? I ended up bringing just one flat cap because I knew that Paul was gonna have some goodies waiting for me. So I packed light to begin with. But I gotta admire, like, anybody that lives in like the Northeast knows that you get folks from the South, from the deep South, you get folks from Texas, you get folks from Georgia, and they come back and they're wearing their cowboy hat with such gumption and such like ease. And it is very admirable because, right, it's one thing to go in, if you're living in the deep South and you don't go anywhere and you stay within your zone, you're going to wear your cowboy hat because you know you're going to see other cowboy hats. But when those folks go, those hat guys, they go and they take their cowboy hat over to the Northeast or to the West Coast, where they're probably not going to see another cowboy hat. It's going to be a little bit parts and parcel for them to see another cowboy hat. That's very ballsy. And like, even if somebody like, it's not easy. It's not a big leap to go and see that somebody's looking at that person like that. That person is bold. Like, they got something. They're confident, right? Because like, even as a hat wearer like myself, I'm like, wow, that'd be a little bit more difficult even for myself to go and pull off. And the one thing I wanted to share, because I know Nathan mentioned the graphic, and I do want to show that for those folks that want to kind of see that graphic. I use ChatGPT for this, that way you guys can go and maybe pause it if you guys want to go and zoom in on this. But this is something that I can share with anybody. It's not like something that's, a trade secret. I'm a researcher by trade, and something like this, I've been using the reason action approach in psychology for so many years. My first job revolved around the reason action approach in the earlier iterations, right? And I used it to be able to predict and address military intention to join the military among youth, as well as intention to recommend the military among educators as well as parents. So this is one of those models of psychology that really has a lot of benefits beyond just how to create new hat wearers. But it's the way that I view things in terms of how do I go about trying to initiate or attempt to initiate change, or some, and obviously, hatters, marketers, and people like that. Something like this is very useful, and it's a very, very simple model. It's not anything that's like so like revolutionary that you're like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that this. In other words, I think people intuitively know that this is how folks go about making the decision to do something like wearing a new hat, like wearing a hat even though they never wore a hat before. And it really, and just to kind of just summarize, it really talks about intention to perform a behavior is the biggest predictor of whether one actually does perform a behavior. So in which case, the behavior is the decision to wear a hat. And really, that intention is determined by three factors, according to this model. One is what is your attitude towards the behavior? In which case, your attitude towards wearing hats. And that's where folks like, influencers like Paul, right? Paul's a hatter. Influencers like Nathan. Nathan is a businessman. He's been in business for 30 years. So somebody's like, all right, well, if it's good enough for Nathan, it's good enough for me, right? Like you guys are all ambassadors of this, right? We're all ambassadors of this hobby, and we are there to try to create positive attitudes towards hat wearing, right? We highlight the benefits. We address misconceptions, right? Like the gentleman that thought I was bald. I just took off my hat and say, nope, not a bald guy. Nothing wrong with being bald, but I'm not bald. That's not my intention. Is to cover up, a bald head, and show like real life. People, right? This is how I go about my business day to day as a hat wearer. And that attitude, I got to tell you, the attitude towards doing something for me is the biggest part of this model, right? Like everything else falls into that, right? So like the idea of perceived norms, right? This is the folks around you, the environment around you. Are they like encouraging of hat wearing or not? And this is where we also come in, right? We are part of somebody's network. There are a lot of folks out there that are not hat wearers, but they know us. And if we're able to encourage them and create an environment for them where we enable them or at least empower them, if they're hat curious, to be able to say, okay, it's socially acceptable. You're going to be able to hang out with Luke, no problem. Luke is a hat guy, right? And create, like it says here, diverse role models. In community, a sense of community and belonging, because that's what we get from Facebook. We get that from Instagram. We get that from the Fedora Lounge. We're out there to try to find our tribe, right? Paul obviously is a hatter. He's out there and he's there to market his product as well. But beyond that, beyond the business goal, Paul wants to see other people wearing hats because let's be honest, it makes us feel good when we go out there and we don't see it. We could potentially go out there and never see another hat. Or another hat person, but we can easily go online and see other folks that are doing this every day, and that's good. There's nothing wrong with that. And then obviously that we talked about perceived control. Like there's a lot of folks, they don't think that they can do this, right? It's kind of like doing exercise, right? A lot of folks will be like, there's no way I can run a marathon, right? But it's like, well, nobody said you have to go run a marathon. What do you want to do? Do you want to lose weight? Maybe you could go walk. Right? Maybe you can go lift some dumbbells and get fit that way. You can also build muscle, and then that will burn more calories, and you can lose weight that way. So I think it's a very useful model for a lot of things. But when Nathan approached me with this topic, I went right to the reason action approach because for me, and again, somebody else that maybe is a psychologist, you might have your own opinions about the reason action model. But for me, it's kind of like just a useful framework for how this process can go about. And if you really buy into it, well, maybe you could start incorporating this. I can see this as being very useful for hatters, right? So hatters like Paul, like Brian, like Robert, like Josh, and anybody else that's a hatter, no matter what stage you are, to say, okay, how do I go and be a good steward, not just a good businessman, right? Because obviously there's nothing wrong with making money. You can use it to make some more money, but also beyond just the business proposition, to create new hat folks, or at least if you don't end up creating a new hat person, you can create somebody that's going to be more open to the idea of wearing a hat. And I'll tell you, I'll take this off that way I can see you guys. But you guys hopefully got a chance to see that model. But I shared a story in our group about the one of my friends, Lynn. I've known her for many years. I met her. She's a Mets fan, just like I am. She's from New York, so we have a lot in common. But Lynn is a big admirer of hats. She doesn't wear them herself, but when she saw my social media post, she made a point to go and tag me on a post and say, you know what, my husband. One, I really like what you're doing. I hope that this trend continues of seeing men wearing hats out there. And when she says men, I think she's also meaning just mankind, right? The idea of hat. And then she mentioned and shared with me that her husband also started just recently wearing hats and posted a photo of him. And one, you know how good that made me feel, right? Because if I had anything to do with that, right? Or you guys, right? Because obviously you guys are also part of my network, and I share a lot of your your posts on my channel, and obviously you guys are part of this YouTube channel. If that had any part of her husband becoming a hat person, wow, what a feather in our cap, so to speak, right? Because that's what it's all about. Because I got to think about, like, if your wife, right? So obviously some of us have significant others. If your significant other says, you know what, babe, you look great in a hat. Wouldn't that make, like, for me, like, wow, yes. I would want to at least try to explore that, because who doesn't want, like, that kind of feedback? And I have to share that because, I just
yeah, one of my biggest like if I put on a hat, I like my wife, and I'm like, all right, well, and she'll tell me like, yeah, that looks really good, or no, that doesn't. And that's the litmus test for me, and because I feel confident, like if she says, hey, you look good in that, that's the one I'm going to get. So, hey, guys, I'm going to jump off, get some of these errands done. I'm going to keep watching. A wonderful topic. And like I said, I think it's just a gateway topic, right? It just opens up all these little paths and pathways you can kind of get down and converse. So, Paul, always a pleasure. I will talk to you tomorrow. We're going to start collaborate on that project, and we'll kind of release some new news about that. And Luke, always a pleasure. I'll keep watching and chiming in. Good topic, man. Thank you, guys.
Thank you so much, Nathan. Be safe out there. Safe travels.
Yeah.
You as well.
All right. See you, Nathan. Well, Nathan Tuck, again, Nathan is probably being also very, very gracious. Nathan suggested this topic, and I honestly, when I saw it, was like a no-brainer topic, right? Like, yes, this is what it's really all about. So shout out to you, Nathan, for not wanting to take the credit, but I'm going to give you the credit because this was your idea. And I welcome everybody in the network that has access to that calendar to try to go and anything that you want to talk about, because, well, I like to think that I know everything that the person out there, the audience, wants to talk about, but I can't. Like, I know you guys are in various levels, because some of you guys are hatters like Paul, and some of you guys are bigger hat people than me. And I welcome your input, because again, you could be speaking for some audience member that they really want to hear a discussion on this topic. And I think it's been a great. Paul, what?
Yeah, I think hatters that you've got in the group have always got a story to tell. I mean, I've had a gentleman today reach out wanting me to quote on a hat that's from a TV series many years ago, and the manufacturer that originally manufactured the hat is not in a position to manufacture it anymore, and he wants me to recreate it. And you know, these are probably people that are enthusiasts about that television program and so on. And again, that's another way of getting into being a hat enthusiast. I mean, I think if we can continue meeting these people, making their, I wouldn't say their dreams, but certainly making their aspirations of owning a hat come true, and deliver to it's this value thing between what they're paying for a hat and what they're getting as the made up item. Because you know, you ask somebody in the street, how much would you pay for a rabbit fur felt fedora? They've got no idea. You know, it's sort of aspirational beyond. You know, it's like getting a Rolex watch. You know, it's something that other people have, you'd love to have, but you never really think you'd have the cash to be able to do it. And I think that's where we've got to help people understand that it is actually nearer to your you know, your pocket than perhaps you realize, you know. But no, look, great chat today on all of this, and really enjoyed it. And I think I'm going to have to hit the road, as they say now. But you know, I'm glad this is my. I think this is a bit high for me, but you know, it's
it looks good.
I think, you know,
it looks good, Paul. Like I said, it fits your frame. Like I said, if you ever go and decide to go visit the South, right, or even anywhere, right. So I think that the cowboy hat is so synonymous within the U.S. No matter where you go. They'll be like, you know, so you can imagine that somebody goes and watches, sees Paul coming down the road. They're like, and they'll start thinking they got a cowboy, and then Paul starts speaking in his accent. I just think that I have a great
confuse a few people. Yeah. Anyway, I'll pick up with you, no doubt, at the next door in a few chat's time. And you know, thank you very much to everybody that supported me to get to where I am with the YouTube channel. And you know, I really enjoy it. Yeah, so I'll see you very soon. Thanks,
ciao,
guys.
my friend. All right, Paul John Murphy, Nathan Tuck, thank you guys for joining the discussion today. Wow, you know, again, I feel like this is something that's going to you know, it's inherent in everything that we do, right? So I mean, right, like I said, we're all human beings. We all have that idea of wanting to find our tribe, right, so to speak. And it's nice that where we can go and discuss, well, what are the things that we can actually do that are actually actionable, right? And that's why hopefully, you know, again, whether you agree with the framework that I provided or not, it's just one idea, right? But I really wanted to share that because, again, there's a lot of folks that come at this hat hobby from different, right? There's folks that are hat enthusiasts, like myself and Nathan, and we got hatters like Robert and Paul and Josh and Brian. All of us come at this from a different standpoint, but really we all benefit from having new hat people, right? From new hat wearers. And even if somebody decides that they never wear a hat, right? Just the fact that we're normalizing it and we're good people, right? You know, that one thing is like if you have a friend that really wants to wear a hat but doesn't want to pay for a hat, right? Well, besides the fact that they can go and maybe join my channel and maybe win this hat, right? And it'll come to them for free, maybe minus shipping costs. You know, besides that, maybe you can loan, right? I mean, just make sure that, you know, you don't have a hat that you're like, it's priceless, right? Because Brad, right? Shout out to Brad Bowers, the Hat Professor. He shared a story of loaning one of his hats to a friend, and the friend didn't take care of it, right? So you don't want to lose a friend, right, over loaning out your hat. But to the degree that you're comfortable loaning out a hat to somebody that's just curious about wearing a hat, maybe they're like, I don't like hats, but I like this one. Maybe you can loan them one of your hats, you know, for a day or a week or however long you're comfortable being without your hat, to see if that, right, they can see how it lives. And these are these little tiny things that we could do to kind of ingratiate ourselves and kind of put our best foot forward in terms of creating new hat people, or at least folks that respect the hat wearers, even if they don't want to be one. So, I mean, I thought it was a great discussion. Again, you know, I will tell you is that, like always, just support the folks that are on this channel, even if you don't support me, right? Again, don't get me wrong. I love your support, but, you know, if you have to choose, maybe, I don't know why you would have to choose, but if you don't want to support Luke, but you want to support Robert or Paul or Josh or Brad or anybody else that's on this channel in any way, then go ahead and do that, right? I encourage you to do that. But you know how I will always leave you, right? Like, even if you don't support myself or any of the fine folks that happen and make their way onto this channel, there is one thing you got to do, right? The one thing that is non-negotiable. Well, I don't know. I don't know who we're gonna get after you. Maybe we'll get Pikachu after you, right? Had it, felted hat Pikachu. Shout out to my friend Quan who gifted me this hatted Pikachu. Yeah, but Pikachu, he's pretty harmless. He won't do anything but maybe just say something cute and maybe hit the little subscribe button for you. But the one thing you gotta do regardless is you gotta stay hatting, my friend. Have a great day. Ciao, everybody.